Kyle Bass is founder and CIO at Hayman Capital Management. Kyle, what do you think? I mean, honestly, doesn't it seem like China is almost like the side story here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, TikTok isn't a side story. It's a digital fentanyl. I call it a digital Trojan horse into the 170 million households in the U.S. The Supreme Court has ruled, so have the appellate courts. If you read the rulings, it has to be sold or it has to be shut down. And if Xi Jinping elects to shut it down as opposed to selling it to Oracle, it does 12 billion in revenue in the U.S. It does about 36 billion globally. I think in the U.S., this thing will trade for 35 to 50 billion. If he takes zero over 40 billion, then you know why TikTok was here. It'd be the greatest tell in China's history. But as far as being a sideshow, look, Xi Jinping has been closing himself down to business really since the first quarter of March, or first quarter of 2023, where he severed all macro and micro level data to the U.S. I mean, I wonder if the CEOs that went to this conclave in Beijing have read the Director of National Intelligence's threat assessment report that's put into Congress every year in February. I mean, they are certainly our largest enemy. It's written out of intelligence.
I suppose what I mean by that, and we were talking about this, a month or two ago with Derek Scissors over at AEI, when the president first started kind of warning or signaling that tariffs on Mexico and Canada were a big part of his focus. And Derek said, it's just interesting he's coming at those partners right out of the gate and not at China. And we've put tariffs on China in the meantime, but we have the president and Xi Jinping talking about a summer meeting. They're talking about making a deal on TikTok and maybe offering some concessions in order to do that. So that's what I mean, is that from the White House, it almost seems as though the China story is somewhat on the back burner, while now this fight, especially with Canada, is much more in the forefront, and with the Europeans as well.
Yeah, no, I think, okay, you have to look at Trump's tariffs in three buckets. It's really important to understand what he's doing. First, the first bucket is blunt force trauma looking for an immediate response. That's what the tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China are about. They're about two things. They're about the fact that China opened up operational manufacturing facilities in Mexico and Canada to avert any kind of tariffs or sanctions on Chinese companies in China. So when you look at the rise of Mexico and Canada, it's not just Mexican and Canadian companies, it's Chinese companies selling things through those two venues into the U.S. Mm-hmm. And we know how these transshipments work. The other thing is fentanyl. Operation Lone Star in Texas in the last 4.5 years, the state of Texas has interdicted and confiscated 350 million lethal doses of fentanyl coming through Mexico from China into America, enough to kill every single man, woman, and child in America. Just think about that for a second. We have to stop that. The Mexican leadership is either complicit or even worse as part of that scenario. They have to shut that down. Mm-hmm. So when President Trump comes out swinging at Mexico and Canada, along with China, it's very much focused at China all the way through.
Understood. So let me play this. I don't know if you caught this yesterday. Mark Fields, the former Ford CEO, was on Money Movers, and he said he thinks the president's tariffs, the latest auto tariffs, could actually benefit the Chinese car makers. Take a quick listen.
I think the one benefactor to all this, and the ones who are the happiest, are the Chinese OEMs, domestic OEMs, because while their Western competitors are distracted, they can double down on growth and innovation.
We also had another guest from Bank of America, Kyle, who said, because I asked the same question, if everyone's going up market to deal with tariffs, who feels the lower end, especially when there's 100% tariffs on Chinese cars? And he said, don't rule out the possibility that if the Chinese come to the U.S. and say, we're going to have American plants with American workers making Chinese EVs that are going to be way low cost and good for consumers, the president might strike that deal. So I'm curious what your take is on all of that.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe. I think, whenever Xi Jinping moves around China, he bans Teslas from any of the local jurisdictions that he's traveling to because of the way that they gather data. I rode in a BYD for the first time in my life in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and it is identical to a Tesla. The door handles, the buttons, the car inside, the screen. I mean, if I parachuted you in there and put you in a BYD, it is a Tesla. And so when you think about the way that we might accept low-cost Chinese EVs in America, we'd be, again, allowing kind of something that is a national security threat into our country, and also something that is heavily subsidized, right? Their labor rates, their electricity rates. A lot of times what China will do to put U.S. manufacturers out of business, like steel, like aluminum, and cars for that matter, they will have us relying on them for such core constituencies of our, not only our economy, but of our strategic interests as far as steel, aluminum, automobiles, and defense are concerned. We just can't allow that to happen, Kelly. So I don't think that's likely to happen.
So you take the other side of that.